course, Julie will point at me as I'm having a cup of coffee. Welcome to Java with Jerry. It is Wednesday, February 21st. And as always, we're coming to you from high atop the penthouse suite of Stadium Center in the Platinum Triangle with another episode of Java with Jerry. A little switch up today. We were going to have Councilwoman Chris Murray from Anaheim here, but an emergency arose and she has to attend to other issues and cannot make it. So instead, you get the jabbering Jerry. So those of you who are tuning in only to see Chris, I'm sorry. We are going to have her, we are going to have her on a future episode working with trying to figure out a date to schedule that in because we're booked out for a ways, but we will bring her in and we will go over all the things we were going to talk to her about today. She just couldn't avoid it. So first, I want to take a moment to remind those of you who have not already done it to go to orangeslice.com. That's where you can find all the prior episodes. If you missed one, I commend them to you. Go and watch them because we've had some great guests and they've had some interesting things to say. And you can also pick up lots of information there about what the show's about and what we're doing. And you can pick up an opportunity for those of you that want to listen to the show rather than watch it, a way to sign up at Podbean or iTunes and be able to pick it up as a podcast. And I know some of you are doing that because you'd rather do it while you're traveling or while you're working out and the like. And there are lots of ways to consume Java with Jerry. So we hope that you'll go and do that at orangeslice.com. A little bit also about the contest. We've been telling you that you can send in your Dumb Criminal of the Week story. We have one this week that we're going to do. We want you to send yours in. We're having a contest. We'll pick some from your suggestions, put them on the air, and then from among those that we air, we'll select one and you'll win a Java with Jerry cup for your contribution. So if you've got a dumb criminal story you particularly like, please make sure to share it with us. So this morning, we're going to do a little news, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the issues that is certainly impacting Orange County, and it's having an impact in a lot of different ways. The issue of affordable housing, what the cities are doing about it, why we're having an issue with housing in a county that has all this wealth, and why it's a problem for not only you if you own a home, but also you if you don't and want to stay in Orange County. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that the cities and the state are trying to do and why they may not in fact be effective and may in fact be counterproductive. So we'll talk a little bit about that in place of our interview with Chris. Let's talk about the news. Lots to cover. Obviously on the national front, because we always start there, some sad news to share this morning. Just broke this morning that Billy Graham died at the age of 99, an icon in American cultural history. I don't think there is a soul alive who hasn't heard Billy Graham or heard of him, no matter what your age. And he had a huge impact on public life in our country. He was really a advisor and mentor in ways of the faith for many, many presidents, starting back in Truman, way before I was around, and certainly became sort of the unofficial chaplain of the White House and an advisor to many presidents on issues of faith and otherwise. And he was certainly someone who touched millions, hundreds of millions of people across a very long career. So at the age of 99, he passed on today and went on to his reward. And I think this country will surely miss Billy Graham. And so we pass along our condolences to all of his family. On the national front also, you can't have been awake this week without having to deal with the tragedy of Parkland, where a high school student goes in and shoots up all of his fellow classmates and some teachers and administrators, and 17 people die, many, many more injured in the dozen. And it's just, once again, somebody who is a misfit or has a problem with a mental health and or is depressed or has a drug problem grabs a weapon and goes into a gun-free zone and wreaks havoc on all those lives. And you're catching it daily on the news as these kids who are now subjected to that are becoming active about voicing their opinion that they don't want this to ever happen again. And they're marching on their state capitol, and then they're going to march on the federal government and ask for some action. I'm not certain what the net effect of that is and how we can solve it, but I do know that as adults we're failing those kids in those schools, and we're not protecting schools well enough, and our FBI certainly dropped the ball here. if reports are to be believed, there was at least one report that was complete and thorough. They always tell us, if you see something, say something. Well, someone did. They called, they gave the student's name, they said that they thought Nicholas Cruz had a problem, that they thought he was depressed, that he is writing on social media about wanting to purchase guns and wanting to do acts of violence, that he wanted to become a professional school shooter, whatever that is, and that they were concerned about him acting out, and the FBI heard all those clues, got all that information, and did nothing. And they missed the fact that this kid had been visited at his home 39 times in recent months by the authorities. How do we miss all those clues and those red flags and then end up with 17 dead young people at the beginning of their lives, never having even begun to live yet in high school, many dreams shattered, and their families devastated? And we've got to start dealing with this whole notion of violence in our culture. I know people are talking about guns and gun control and weapons of mass destruction, but we also have to talk about the coarsening of our society, it seems to me. This is a time when we should hearken back to some of the things that Billy Graham talked about. Our video games are way too violent. Our movies are way too violent. We are coarsening our kids to become numb to violence and to think that it's a normal course of life. It isn't. It doesn't have a place in young people's lives, to be sure. And we need to start doing something about all of this, because it's getting to be way too much for us to deal with. And whether people use a gun, or they use a plane in a skyscraper, or they use a bomb as they did in Oklahoma City, violence is at the base of all of it, and we have to do something about that. We should certainly not be enamoring violence and giving it great play in Hollywood and in our music and in our culture. So lots of things to deal with on the national level, to be sure, with that, but also on the state and local level. So that's the national news. None of it very good. Our condolences to the Graham family. Our condolences to all the families of those who were injured or who lost children in Parkland. There's no way to understand their grief, and certainly it's not been a great week nationally for that. State news. You want to talk about our coarsening of society? Let's talk about the coarsening of our legislature. So in the state, as you know, in California, we've had a huge effort on the Me Too movement that arose out of really what began in Hollywood with Harvey Weinstein's being outed as a sexual predator. And we find out that that's going on in our legislature, right? We've always known that there's sort of been misdeeds in the legislature. Certainly there have been affairs, and there have been people who have had untoward relationships with lobbyists and staffers, and that has been the source of much rumor, and sometimes it's been the source of people being harsh on their colleagues about their bad behavior, including Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, who was a leader in the Me Too movement, who now herself is suspended from the legislature and under investigation for a whole variety of things. Again, reports to be believed if they are, and there's a notion in this Me Too movement that you're supposed to believe the accusers. Some of her staffers say that she was highly inappropriate. She was constantly reminding them that their jobs were completely dependent upon her goodwill, and that she could fire them at will, which was not a great milieu in which to work, let's say, an atmosphere in which you want to go to work every day. And then on top of that, she would regale them with her own sexual exploits, including having sex with other fellow legislators, which she said was a good way for her to get information. I'm sorry, Assemblywoman, there are lots of ways for you to get information from your colleagues that don't require you being inappropriate. And then she would also encourage her staffers to participate in Spin the Bottle. You got it. I said it right. You didn't hear me wrong. Spin the Bottle, an adolescent game that the Assemblywoman wanted them to engage in. In one case, she actually asked a male staffer, according to him, to come to her hotel room and play Spin the Bottle with her. So she's suspended. They're looking into her behavior. They're looking into the behavior of Assemblyman Mendoza and others. And there have been people on both sides of the aisle who have acted inappropriately in our legislature. Again, the coarsening of our society, stuff our kids have to hear. We're not being great role models, and I really think that there's a time in which we need to get back to the basics. Legislators, just do your work in the legislature. Try to keep your hands in your own pockets. Ugh. All right, local news. What's happening on the local front? I'll touch briefly on this because we're going to talk about it in future episodes in more depth and do some interviews with people who really have expertise on this. But as you all know, Judge Carter had long hearings in federal court in Santa Ana over the last week, and then went out and walked the actual Santa Ana River Trail along the riverbed, and is working hard with advocates for the county and for the homeless as well, and trying to find a place for the homeless to be given services, to be relocated, to get temporary housing, and to clear the riverbed, which had become just a cesspool of disease and crime. And there are a lot of reasons why homelessness exists, and some of the reason that people are homeless has to do with the economy and the lack of affordable housing, which is why we're going to talk a little bit about housing today. But there's also people who are early releasees from prison under our Prop 47 and AB 109 laws in California, that let people out on lesser offenses when they were in fact career criminals. Emptied the prisons early because they needed to comply with federal orders for space, and there are other ways to deal with that than to release prisoners early into the population. And since they can't function, they don't have the ability to go find work as felons. They end up among our homeless, and they prey upon them. And some of the crime that you see among the homeless is crime perpetrated by people who have been thrown into that population as early releasees of prison. And then, of course, you have the sad stories of those who are addicted to substances, and as a result, their lives have become devastated. And there are some who are just mentally ill. And long ago, decades ago, maybe 50 years ago now, dating back into the 70s, we decided that we were going to stop the institutionalization of the mentally ill, thinking that instead society would provide them services and that the private sector would step up, and they didn't. And as a result, they're now among the chronic homeless, and there's just a whole raft of problems around there. But one of the issues deals with the affordability of housing, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in our main segment where we would have interviewed our guests. So stand by for that. So on the local front, that's been going on. The other thing that's been happening locally is, if you're around Southern California, you realize winter has arrived. Yay, it's February, and it finally showed up. For the last week, it's been cold in the morning. When Connie and I are walking, it's brisk in the 30s or the 40s. So enjoy winter. Break out those sweaters. Have a little fun with winter. It'll only be here about a week. Trust me. This is California, and then we'll be back to perpetual summer. Let's talk about the Winter Olympics, which is a way for us to celebrate some winter, even if we're watching it from Pyeongchang in Korea. So our Olympic athletes have been doing good. The Shib, why can't I say that? The Shib Sibs. That's it. The Shib Sibs, Maya and Alex, knocked it out of the park, got a bronze, got up on the podium second time in the same Olympics they've medaled. So you got to feel great for them. Yay, Arcadia, and their parents were in the stands. Has to be a proud moment for them. And then our men in the hockey team made it to the quarterfinals and then lost it in a shootout yesterday. But our women hockey team, the ladies, are really knocking it out of the park. They are formidable. They're a force to be reckoned with, and I guess they're going to be in a gold medal round tonight or tomorrow night. I'm not sure. Tune in to find out on your listings. I think it's tonight. They're playing Canada, so go ladies, show Canada what it's all about, as they say in Canada, and win the gold. We'll be rooting for you. And then, of course, you saw that Virtue and Moir won the ice dancing. They're just incredible. Lots of great athletes, and of course, no Olympics can be without controversy. So there was doping. You got it. Who do you think was involved in the doping? Yes, the suspended Russians who can't even play as Russians. They are the athletes who are from Russia, or whatever their appellation is, during the games, were going to be considered during the games, if they played it straight, for perhaps being able to participate in the closing ceremonies as Russia. Ain't going to happen. One of their athletes was caught doping. Now, I can understand why. This guy's in a stressful sport, curling. Yes, the guy was roiding up for curling. Maybe you just need to have expanded muscle power to be sweeping, right? I mean, maybe he really needed to be on a roid rage to get the sweeping done, but I'm not lying to you. The curling Russian was caught doping, so probably not likely there'll be Russia in the closing ceremonies. It's always the Russians, isn't it? It's always about the Russians. All right, let's talk a little bit about what we were going to put in place of what would have been a fabulous interview with Chris. Chris, aren't you sorry you missed it? We'll have you back. I want to talk a little bit about housing and the affordability of it and how it contributes to some of the homelessness and how it contributes to a lot of other problems that our county has been experiencing. I think you all know we are 3.2 million people in Orange County, 39 million people in California. This problem is not confined to Orange County. The problem I'm going to talk about and the solutions that government imposes are statewide and in lots of communities. I'm just using Orange County because that's where this show is located from and because it gives you a example to use. But the problem is ubiquitous. And here it is. There are far too many people looking for housing than there is supply of housing for a whole lot of reasons that would take up an entire show of their own. But suffice it to say that our regulatory schemes in California, the manner in which we make it difficult for home builders to build housing, the zoning that we do in certain locations, all contribute to the problem. But in the end, the state decides that it wants to force policies that will cause housing to be affordable. And so what they do is they say to the localities, you're going to have to hit certain numbers. And each locality is given an allocation from something called the Southern California Association of Governments, which handles the 6 southernmost counties of the state. And they have to meet these housing minimums in various income bands. And so they say to them, you have to hit this many housing units for very low income people, for moderate income people, and the like. And the cities then impose those on home builders. So if you're Acme Home Builders and you go to the City of Everywhere and you tell the City of Everywhere, I want to build 500 homes, they'll tell you, well, we've got a 10 or 15% affordability load, which means you have to provide 10% of the housing that you're going to build in these affordable bands. What's the natural result of that? You can't change the economics of what it costs to build a home, right? If it's going to cost X to build a home, it's going to cost X to build a home. And so what the builder has to do is figure out how he's going to absorb having to sell the home for far less than market rate so that he can meet these affordability requirements that are mandated by the government, by the city who has received the mandate from the regional bodies who have received it through the state. So what does he do? Home builder is a rational business person. He has shareholders to answer to, or partners if it's a privately held company. Or if he holds it all himself, he still has his family to think about. So he has to turn a profit. How does he do that? He goes to his CFO and says, calculate for me on your calculator how much I'm going to lose on each of these affordable units in these various levels of income bands that I have to build and market to, and tell me what my net loss is for the 10% of the homes, the 50 homes of the 500 that we're going to build that we have to put into this affordable category. And the accountants come back and tell them, this is the net delta loss. You're going to lose fill in the blank. $12 million. He then takes that $12 million, divides it among the 450 market homes, raises a price on those homes to afford the loss on the ones he has to make affordable, the net result of which is the affordability which the government has mandated for those 50 homes has made the 450 homes less affordable. That's why we're losing our millennials. That's why young families can't afford to live in California anymore, why they have to go to other states. Because we make housing less affordable in the name of giving 50 families the big lotto ticket. Why do I call it the lotto ticket? Well, they get the affordable home at a level in which they can afford, so they get a $700,000 house for, let's say, $300,000, and they get them a mortgage for that. But they put a 55-year covenant on that home that says you can't sell it to anyone except somebody in your same economic band, and you, when you leave, won't be able to have any equity because you didn't buy it at market rate, so it's not appreciating at market rate for you, and we teach them, therefore, to cheat. Here's how we teach them to cheat. This is the worst and most insidious thing we do of all. Forget the fact that 50 families got affordable housing. They really don't get to do much with it. Since they aren't appreciating and gathering equity like their neighbors, they're living across the street from someone who bought a $700,000 house at market rate. A couple of years into their ownership, their equity has increased, and now they can start doing things to the home to remodel it. They start putting in shutters. They change their walkways in front. Maybe they throw in a spa in the back. And your family living there in affordability across the street looks and says, gee, I wish I could do some of that to my home, but I don't have any equity. And so after a couple of years, the wife says, gee, I want to be able to do something in our backyard, and we can't. I want to be able to get new flooring, and I'm stuck on standard linoleum. I'd like to have shutters like our neighbors across the street, and we can't. So the husband is complaining about this to a friend one day who also happened to live, say, 2 neighborhoods away, who had friends who lived in an affordable unit, or maybe he had an affordable unit. And he said, yeah, that's why I ended up renting my place. The homeowner says, wait, you can't rent your place. It has to be owner occupied if you've got it on an affordable plan. Yeah, I know it says that, but the city doesn't come around knocking on your door asking for your ID and a copy of your deed. They don't know if you got a renter in there. And the reason I rented it is, do you know what the rents are in our neighborhood? No clue. Well, our mortgage is only $900 because it's depressed because we bought it cheap. But the market rate for our house is really about $3,500. So I rented mine for $3,500, paid the $900 mortgage, took the delta, bought myself a house outside of that area where homes were more affordable, maybe in the Inland Empire or beyond. And I'm now living in a 3-bedroom house. It's got the backyard. My wife can do upgrades. We can do the things we wanted to do in that home because now we've got market rate housing and we get the equity appreciation. So we've taught the people that won the lottery ticket how to cheat unless they want to hang on to the lottery ticket for the 55 years. Here's why I call it a lottery ticket. Let's say they decide, I'm just going to hang. They get the house when they're 30. They manage to live in it for 55 years until they're 85. Then they hit the lottery ticket. The covenant comes off. The value of the house is the true value of the house. They can then flip it or they can leave it to their children, and they've hit the lottery ticket. A house they bought for $300,000 that was worth initially $700,000 is now probably $2.3 million 55 years later, becomes a cash cow if they can live that long. So they've got 2 choices. They can cheat along the way, or they can wait until they're elderly and hit the lottery ticket. None of that makes sense in terms of teaching them how to be a homeowner or making that house available for movement like we would like in the marketplace. And all of it costs the market properties to have been more unaffordable for families who are looking for housing. So none of this makes any sense. And you see cities talking about things like inclusionary zoning. When they're talking about that, they're talking about those mandates that make housing less affordable. Pay attention to what your elected leaders are talking about. Pay attention to what they're doing in your community and start being more active about talking to them about doing housing correctly. It makes no sense at all to do it the way we're doing it. And it adds to the problem of unaffordability, which adds to homelessness. If people are very, very close on their budgets to being able to afford housing in a county like Orange County, they have choices to make. They can either move far out and increase their commute, which makes life more stressful for them and for their family, and often means that parents can't be around for their children's activities, not a great way to live. Or they can start consuming more and more of their budget on housing and less on vital things they need, like food, medicine, education, and other things. Also not a good recipe. And all the efforts by the government to shoehorn in affordability by contrivance rather than allow the market to solve the problem by increasing the abundance of housing is not solving the problem. It's making it worse. So pay attention to inclusionary zoning, not what you think it is and not good. It doesn't make us more inclusive. It makes us more exclusive, and we're excluding our young people from having a future here. So if you're a millennial, you graduate from college, you look around at the price of housing and what it costs you to be able to afford to live in California, you start looking for other places to exercise what you've learned in school and to have a career. And if you're a retiree in a state in which you've got lots and lots of debt, that's about the only time it makes sense for you to leave. Housing prices have gone so high, you can take your retirement to a low-cost state and then make a unit available. But otherwise, you're graying in place. So the elderly aren't leaving, young people are, productivity is dropping off, housing is not becoming more affordable, all because the government is trying to mandate how we do this. We need market rate solutions and not unaffordable housing. So there you go. There's a little bit about why we have added to our own homelessness with some of our dumb government regulations. All right, it's time for our feature, so let's do it now because I've been babbling long enough. Let me get to our feature. Look at all the things I was going to ask Chris Murray about. Whoa. All right, our feature today, I went too far, is Dumb Criminal of the Week. And this is an oldie but a goodie, but I think you're going to like this story. So this happened some years ago in Los Angeles, and it's one of my faves. Maybe it's one of my faves because I spent some time as a banker in my early life. I was a banker before I was a businessman, a lawyer, and now a consultant. And so it sort of tickles my banker funny bone. It seems that a bank robber wanted to go in and grab some money from the counter and approached the teller and slipped her a note. And the note said, here's a canvas bag along with my note. Fill it with all the bills in your drawer. Don't touch the alarm. I've got a gun and I'll use it. And so the teller complied and did as she was instructed in the note, filled the canvas bag, slid it back across the counter to the robber, slid the note over to the side. And as soon as the robber turned around and started to walk away, of course, she hit the alarm. The cops rolled out in great speed, as they always do. She handed them the note, and they were off and running, trying to find this robber, looking at tape, trying to see what his face looked like on the light. Hour and a half or so later, the robber arrives at home. Appears he was hungry, wanted to stop off for lunch. So he took a little break and went to a Dairy Queen, got himself a burger and a shake. But when he arrived home, as soon as he pulled in his driveway, he was just swarmed with cops. Cars from everywhere. They're waiting for him. They arrest him holding his canvas bag. And he's astonished. How did they get to him so quickly? And so he says, out of a stunned, shocked, exasperated sort of tone, how did you get here? How did you know? And they said, well, it was the note you slipped the teller. And he said, the note I slipped the teller, thinking, how would they find it on that? And he said, yeah, it was the note you slipped the teller. See, you wrote it on the back of your deposit slip. There's our Dumb Criminal of the Week. If you're going to write a banknote, don't write it on your own deposit slip. Anyway, that's our story. It's a true one. Happened in Los Angeles. Hope you enjoy it. Don't forget to send in your stories and compete for your mug. We will be back next week with another episode of Java with Jerry. As always, we will have Jim Vanderpool, the city manager from Buena Park, as our guest. Jim's a lot of fun to have on. There's lots going on in Buena Park. He'll have a lot to share with you. In the meantime, enjoy some Olympics. Watch out for those doping curlers. It's always the Russians. And enjoy our ladies Olympic team. Go ladies, we're rooting for you. We want you to bring home the gold. Have a great week. Make good choices. And we'll see you next week on Java with Jerry.